Do you ever feel stuck? The alarm goes off and you think, is this really my life? Do you wish you could douse your relationships or your career or even your business with rocket fuel and throw a match on it? End the blah once and for all. They either launch or they burn up and you get to start over. I've been there and I see you. I'm Ben Walters, an entrepreneur, pastor, coach, and consultant. If you're ready to get unstuck and ignite your super pumped life or business, I'll give you the rocket fuel and the match. All you have to do is light it. Do you seek more authenticity in your relationships? Are you struggling to find purpose and meaning in your work? Do you want your life to matter, even beyond the things you do in your career or even your life? Do you want to have a positive impact on others or not? If so, listen on, because this interview is for you. Welcome, Merle.
Oh, hello, Ben. It's good to see you. Yes.
So Merle has recently retired from 41 years of teaching and is really an award-winning teacher, and his impact goes far and wide. And just as an example of that, my daughter is living in Boston, Massachusetts, and was recently on an interview with a founder of a really cool science startup company working in physics and neuroscience. And the founder was actually one of Merle's students. And so this interview took a completely different direction based on just her glowing praise of Merle's class and just the impact that he had on her life. And so as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about how a lot of us struggle with just the meaning of our career and really trying to be impactful in our life. All of us want to live lives of meaning and purpose. And so I wanted to bring on a guest who I thought has done that, who has really lived a life that has been meaningful to him, but also had a ripple effect on the wider world. And so with that introduction, I say thanks for coming on, Merle.
Oh, you're welcome. By the way, I'll only really accept that compliment if your daughter receives a job offer. So
okay, that sounds like a deal. Let's land that for her. That would be great. So I wanted to ask you about that because a lot of people, like I mentioned, just are struggling through jobs they really don't like. So tell me a little bit about what you have loved about teaching and how it's impacted your life.
Well, a former head, Tony Gicacci, said repeatedly to the faculty that it's all about the kids. And that's something that I've embraced almost from the beginning. I will admit that what got me into teaching initially was the love of the discipline. I'm a historian. Okay. And my approach to history is interdisciplinary. So it includes not just the normal political history, but social, intellectual, architecture, art, economics, religion.
Wow.
The whole gamut. I mean, the object is to discover more clearly who are we. So that's what got me involved initially. But with each year that passed, the kids became more and more and more important, and that the content of the course, the objectives of the course, whether it's to expand your horizons in terms of understanding, how we got to where we are today, the history of civilization in terms of its evolution, the way we've collaborated, all the exciting people that you run into, whether it's Leonardo da Vinci or God forbid, Adolf Hitler, we can't ignore him. But it always became more and more all about the kids, the students themselves. Provides incredible purpose and meaning for the life of the teacher. And it's a two-way street. The students, feed the teacher, and I think the teacher feeds the students. It's a wonderful sharing opportunity.
Nice. So you're trying to build within the students kind of an awareness of the wider world around them, and at the same time also help them figure out within this great, big, massive world who they are and what their purposes and contribution. Say a little bit more about that.
Well, a really fine historian these days is a man by the name of Harari,
Uh-huh.
and he talks about what's unique about the human species is our ability to collaborate. And
Okay.
so I think that's in exposing children to the tremendous story of who we are. I think they can then discover that there are opportunities for them to find their way into life in a much more meaningful way. That it's certainly, and this is in the foremost of many of the kids' minds. How am I going to transition from being a kid
Uh-huh.
to an adult, to being an independent adult with a career, with a job, so that I can afford, an apartment or a home, put food on the table. Um, that transition weighs on students in ways that they're not always completely aware. And I
So
think,
you think even at the high school level, that's kind of a weight just
yes,
on their shoulders, that
yes.
there's this, is it an external pressure or an internal pressure? Is it parental that you need to do well in school so you can go to a good college and get a great job and have a great life? Is that the progression, or is it more within them of wanting these
Oh,
things?
I think it's both, but a lot of it, I think some of it is relatively, it is too focused sometimes on just simply money and materialism. And that I think
Okay.
if they understand more fully what it is to be human and the richness of whether it be music, architecture, um, philosophy, what have you, that there is greater meaning in life. Now you've got to have a job. And that's
Sure.
where I
Yeah.
think for those who might listen to this that have pursued a different profession for a period of time and have not found that completely satisfying, um, they those individuals coming into teaching have tremendous opportunity to tell kids what it's like in the adult world, making a
Sure.
living. Um,
Sure.
Sometimes I think teachers that have been teaching the whole throughout their career, they're a little bit of a disadvantage to help students make that, to begin to think about that transition. Um, and one of my
So
concerns, and another call to those individuals who might have been in the job market and pursuing professional careers that have ended up finding them spending their entire day in front of a screen,
uh-huh.
and or maybe even working from home on
Sure.
a screen. Uh,
Can be very
it's,
isolating.
yes, it's isolating, and so much of what we are, if we go back to this idea of collaboration, so
Uh-huh.
much of what we are as a human race is dependent on our exchanges with one another, not just online, but much more significantly in person. And
Sure.
well, you get that in spades when you work as a classroom teacher.
You
And
definitely
yeah,
do. Well, and I saw that with your classes just in the there was a couple of times I was in the classroom invited in as a guest, and also then I was a part of a field trip you did out in our city, and just seeing your interactions with the students, not necessarily when you were teaching, but as students were getting off the bus and you're talking about the kid making a shot in the basketball game or a great race somebody had done, or even just being privy to their conversations with one another and what's going on in their lives, what's pressing. It struck me that there was this level of connection and engagement that I'm sure during the pandemic years you weren't able to have, because they weren't interacting with each other in the same way, and also you weren't privy to those conversations because either the microphone was turned off or it was all by text. So there's great value, it sounds like, from what you're saying, in that just human to human interaction in the classroom on a very raw, personal level.
right. Yeah, I initially my interest was perhaps was more in the direction of teaching on the college level.
Okay.
The high school, though, did provide an opportunity that at first I didn't entirely understand or embrace. And I think many young people going into teaching now don't recognize the opportunities to connect with students outside the classroom. So,
Say more about that. So
well,
you're saying
well,
teachers today are
yeah.
more
Well,
not 9 to 5, but
yeah, well,
7 to
3:30
3.
sometimes. And now that I'm
3:30.
retired,
That's the
I'm walking the neighborhood with my wife, and there are buses that are unloading students at 2 and 2:15 in the afternoon, which is surprising to me. I think school should be a place where students and teachers um, work together outside just the classroom. And so
so
I
you
coached.
you really valued the bigger sense of community within the school. Is that
That's right.
fair to
So
say?
again, back to the college scene. You'll have.
Okay.
I have a sister who is a English professor long term. So she'll teach
Yeah.
one or two.
Barbara, right?
Yeah, one or two classes a semester. She has a sabbatical every 4 years, um,
Wow.
and teaches maybe 2 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week, um, and that's it. And
Wow.
so, as a teacher, I coached cross country and track, and it wasn't just that I developed a kind of authenticity or a real connection with the kids that ran cross country and track. I
Uh-huh.
think the kids in the entire school saw Merle Black out there running with the students, or coaching them on a day that in a March day when it was blowing and raining as it has been here
Uh-huh.
for hour upon hour upon hour, and you're in the trenches with the kids,
Uh-huh.
and
They
it,
appreciate that, don't they?
yeah, and it's not as though you're one of the kids. They don't look
Right.
at you as we're buddies. I tell this story.
Okay.
A good friend of mine, Tim Dunn, who was the chair of the science department, also coached football and baseball, won
Uh-huh.
some state championships. Phenomenally bright guy. Um, a young student came up to him as we were walking down the hall and looked up at Tim Dunn. Tim Dunn's a very tall fella. And the young fella said, "Mr. Dunn, I want to bond with you." And Tim Dunn said, "Richard, the only thing we're going to bond over is biology." And
Ah.
so I think what and both of them smiled. I mean, this was Tim
Sure.
Dunn's humor.
It's a humorous
But
exchange.
the idea is that um, we're not there to be their buddies. We're there as teachers, as mentors. Um, and but over the course of maybe not the first day or the first week or the first month, they get to know you as a human
Uh-huh.
being, as a
Uh-huh.
teacher, as a person who has real interest in the discipline that leads you into that classroom to sit in that chair. And the teacher's passion is about that discipline, that he or she wants to share this with
Do you
those
think
students.
the students can sense the teachers that are passionate versus the ones who are just cashing a paycheck?
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked to some teachers who have said that, it was a Friday afternoon and they
Uh-huh.
were teaching and their minds were on the weekend. And I'll
Okay.
have to say that I think one of my strengths, I'll confess to it, is that when I'm with another human being, a student or a classroom, I am all there. I'm not anywhere
Wow.
else.
Okay.
The world could be blowing up, and I'm with those students. They're those students are what I care about, but I care
Well, and
about.
that
Yeah,
must be tremendously impactful because so often it's a little flit of attention here and there in our modern world, whether it's digital or whether it's even parental attention. So to have you locked in and engaged with them
yeah.
as humans has to feel pretty good and has to form a pretty deep bond.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that it's provided purpose and meaning in my life. I do recall when I was very young, right from the beginning of attending school. For me, school had a tone of being uh, overly coercive, that
Okay.
it had a sense. And I sometimes ask students this: to what degree do you feel school is a prison? And you get
Wow.
some students that say, oh, yeah, we have to be here. We have to take, attendance a certain number of times a
Sure.
day. I mean, we're corralled. We're
Uh-huh.
told what we can do and what we can't do. And again, back
Sure.
to my early years, what I recall is that what we learned in primary school is to learn how to stand in alphabetical order. You know,
Wow.
you know, um,
Key life skill right there.
right.
Every
Raise your hand.
corporation, they do that every morning.
And I understand that, but uh, kids kids have to be allowed to experience just the spontaneity, the joy, the surprises that one encounters as you learn about a discipline that to become fully human, I think you need to pursue. Whether you don't have to know all the names and dates
Uh-huh.
of the past. Again, I'm a history teacher. It's that some of those names and dates you just embrace, they become part of the story that's told.
Okay.
And so whether it's the history of the Black Death, a tremendous epidemic in 1348 that wiped out one
Uh-huh.
third to one half of Europe's
Wow.
population, that becomes relevant in the sense of our pandemic today. What did they do
Sure.
then to take
Uh-huh.
steps to survive? And by the way, many of them were foolhardy from our point of view.
Okay.
They were misguided. Um,
Okay.
so
So a lot of parallels, but getting the students to make those links between the past and the present, and then how to either steer the course in a positive direction or a different direction in the future is a key thing. So
yeah,
you were less concerned about them, for lack of a better term, memorizing, regurgitating, as
right,
much as being able to apply it to their life and their world around them. Is that fair assessment?
right. So right here in Cincinnati, that we call home. There's
Uh-huh.
many, many interesting people, but
Sure.
you want to shut yourself off from the fascinating people that have lived over the course of time. Uh, So the last thing that a teacher wants to suggest in the way he or she teaches is that history is just a bunch of names and dates. It's a
Okay.
fascinating story about our humanity, and that we're here for a short time, and this short time that we live on this earth, we want it to be meaningful and purposeful. So we've
Right.
come to the party at a particular point in time. The party's been going on for a long, long time. If we
Well
really
before us, and it'll go well after us.
if we really want to participate fully in what's going on, the past has a tremendous impact upon the present and the future. And we
Okay.
just become more fully human in knowing some of the story. Now, again, maybe this sounds a bit boring, but it
No.
isn't if you present it in a way in which you engage students. So, from that point of view, a teacher, and I would strongly recommend this to those who are listening that are thinking about teaching, you need to engage students. They have to actively participate. You cannot stand up as I'm sitting right now and drone on. It has to be a shared learning. And the
Sure.
emphasis cannot just simply be on grades or this notion that the statement that you often hear in teaching, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's
Uh-huh.
that's bullcrap. I mean, in other
Really?
words, the teacher's role is to create a curriculum. I mean, initially, a teacher probably will rely largely on textbooks, but as you
Uh-huh.
develop your skill and your knowledge base, then you want to create a curriculum that is going to be tailored to the students and that will
Okay.
get them involved. In other words, they just can't sit in a
Right.
chair and just take notes. or
No,
listen
it's
or what have you. They have to be actively engaged. That's the success of a classroom. They've got to, I mean, I know I'm going on here, but I'll just give you one more
no.
example. Students, so many of my students, when they graduate, they tell their parents, and even before they graduate, we have to go to Florence. We have
Really?
to climb the Duomo. I
Wow.
need to go to Rome. I need to see Michelangelo's ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I mean, they lobby their parents. I must go. And if that's not feasible at this point, in
Uh-huh.
terms of finances, the students they get back to me 10 and 20 years later, sending me postcards.
So that becomes almost a life quest for them.
Yes,
How
and
rewarding is that for you to plant that seed of something in Italy that happened thousands, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and these students are just so thirsty for that they're going to get there, whether it's with the family or whether it's 10 years later after they've saved up enough money? How gratifying is that for
well, it's
you?
gratifying, but it's my service to people like Michelangelo or
Okay.
Leonardo da Vinci that
Okay.
that the opportunity to share this with kids, to get them excited about it. And I have drawers full of postcards from these kids. And another
That's
thing
so
that
cool.
a teacher has to do is to show the students that you're human. And if you are a bit eccentric, um, and you embrace that and you're aware of
Uh-huh.
it, the kids, they want authenticity. They don't want
Sure.
some plastic
No.
person standing in front of them. So, I tell students a little bit about. I mean, you have to weave it in, and it has to be at the right
Sure.
time of the year. But I'll tell
Okay.
them when we get to Michelangelo and we're talking about the David. I'll tell them
Uh-huh.
that when I first saw the David with my wife, we had just recently been married, and we're standing in front of Michelangelo's David. It's 16 feet tall. And
Wow.
I looked at my wife, and there were tears running down her face as she looked at the David. And then I looked at myself, and then I looked at the David, and I just didn't quite measure up. The kids just think that's hilarious. So,
You felt quite small in that moment.
right. So, but it's fun. And
Uh-huh.
so there has to be a joy in learning and discovery. And another thing about history, it isn't names and dates. It's more about discussion, uh, figuring out different points of view about an event that happened. Many historians will say the Civil War, the American Civil War, has not yet been resolved. The
Right.
South calls it the War of Northern Aggression. So,
Sure.
what is that point of view? Um, there's an incredibly controversial book that was written a good number of years ago, in which historians would get into fistfights over it, where this Fogelman and Engerman argued that the slaves in the South were better off than industrial workers in Europe. And I mean,
Wow.
historians came to blows over this.
Sure. Well, those are pretty
Yes. So there,
provocative takes.
yeah. So that the past is not our understanding of the past. The past happened, but our
Sure.
understanding of it is always open ended. So, every discipline has its incredible opportunities to engage kids. So, for example, mathematics, 2 + 2 = 4. There's something really
Sure.
great about mathematics because you can
Uh-huh.
achieve certain certainties about things. Or
Uh-huh.
the story of evolution, if you're in a biology class, that all life is related, that we all started. Life started as a single celled organism that then replicated. And all of the diversity in life is the result of mistakes in the copying of DNA and the environment in terms of who succeeds in reproducing. And it just the miracle of the minds that we have to use them to expand them beyond just simply, my God, the grade you're getting on something. I
Right.
for me, and for I think I would recommend to teachers, find legitimate ways in which students can succeed. And they have to
Okay.
be legitimate and complement them.
Right.
But
Okay.
don't hammer them with a quiz each day.
Okay.
Just or if it's a quiz that you think, oh, this is something I'm really keen on, and that is when we're getting ready to take the midterm or the final exam,
Uh-huh.
I ask the students to help design the test. What is it
Really?
about what we've learned this year that
That's
you
pretty radical.
oh, and it's wonderful. So the kids are
Huh.
all, man, they're all gung
Wow.
ho, and
Heck
what
yeah.
they talk about are the great things that we've learned. And so
Uh-huh.
that some teachers take the position that what I'm going to find out here in testing kids is what they don't know. I'm not
Right.
interested in what they don't know. I'm interested in what they know. And
Huh.
and
That's a
so
unique take.
there shouldn't be surprises on some assessment. They should
Uh-huh.
know what it is they're being asked to have knowledge about and some degree of mastery. And it's so exciting. I can't tell you how exciting it is to have the kids help design the exam. And we negotiate back and forth and so
Wow.
forth. And
Wow.
at the end, they go into that exam and they're all excited. They're ready to take it. Yeah.
So do those, like, looking at a course over the years, and I know you are a voracious reader and a researcher, and I know your course changes, even the same course year to year to year, but do you see those final exams that the kids design or the students design also changing forms based on what's happening in the world, and or do they end up taking a lot of the same form, just they get there a different way?
Yeah, there are these challenges with AI that
Uh-huh.
are worth talking about.
Oh yeah.
My head of school, who was my student years ago,
That's so wild, huh?
yeah, he
From
believes
your
that,
student to your boss.
right. Um, his position is that, and he spoke to the faculty about this, and just technology in general. He said that he admits that students are less willing to read books. And
Uh-huh.
my sister Barbara, again, who's a college professor, she's a Victorian literature scholar. I mean, to get them to read these 700 or 800 page Victorian
That's a
novels,
tall order. That
oh
is a
my
tall
gosh!
order.
And so um, I believe in giving kids shorter readings with really compelling content, and that it's so important that kids continue to read and to write.
Definitely.
So our head has taken a number of really good steps in terms of technology in general. One, we do not. We were the first school in Cincinnati to eliminate cell phones during the day. That has been a
Okay.
huge plus in terms of getting
Wow.
kids engaged with one another and talking to teachers and maybe going and asking a teacher a question or two. So it's a much more dynamic environment, which as
Uh-huh.
I one of the themes of what I've been saying is that there's a lot of good that happens in the classroom, but there's tremendous opportunities in the hallway just to walk down the hallway and say hello to kids, have them say hello to you, to learn just the decorum of saying hello. But in addition to that,
Well, and that's lost not only in that decorum is lost not only in the school community, but also in the workplace and in just other realms of our life. We are failing to see one another as human beings. So yeah,
and,
that's good practice. That
yeah,
if you can teach that even at 14 to 18, that's a lifelong skill that can carry with
yeah,
those students.
I want to say something about AI, but I think even more important in terms of what you're suggesting is is that opportunity to develop social skills within the
Mhm.
classroom and in the school in general. And um, I, one of the threads for me, a priority for me over my years in teaching, I'm not sure what its origin might be, but any kind of hazing or bullying is
Sure.
just absolutely
And
unacceptable to me.
it's
And
rampant now.
yeah,
It really
and
is.
so for me in the classroom, I uphold the value and the dignity of every single student. I do, and I have to pay attention to that because my classes are discussion based.
Okay.
Um, the ideal classroom for me would be in a circle. And I
Sure.
don't stand and pontificate. I'm
Okay.
sitting with them.
So you're at
And
the same level, and that's intentional.
right. And if
Okay.
I encourage them to challenge me on a particular interpretation or a text, or if they see
Boy,
something
that's
that I didn't
radical.
see, that's what
Okay.
we talk about. But if somebody's comes up with something off the wall, it's a special um, challenge and a gift that I've embraced to not ever allow a student to be uh, felt to be worthless or less than anyone else in the room.
Uh-huh.
And if I see any kind of hazing anywhere in the school, I intervene in ways that I think are
That
productive. Yeah.
that's such an interesting concept as we think about organizational structure and hierarchy too, in that you obviously are the person in the power position, the person of authority within a classroom, and yet you're intentional about trying to stay on the same level, even though everybody knows you're the authority in some degree. But also this idea of listening and not taking challenges as a negative, but actually taking those as a positive. Because so often in organizations, I see leaders, a lot of whom are insecure, who, if somebody under them rises up to say, "Hey, what about this idea?" They quickly squash that. And so it sounds like in the classroom, you bred this kind of you encourage that kind of contribution. But I think that lesson needs to be taken beyond the classroom too.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I feel as though in as a teacher, I'm learning, you know, every minute of the day. I'm learning. Students, their their role is to learn. Well, the
uh-huh,
teachers should be learning as well,
is
and I'm
also learning.
learning from them as much as they're learning from me. Your role is to inspire kids about the material itself, that its value. It has to be relevant. That was the problem for me going through school, is that I wasn't aware. The teachers didn't take the time to explain why what we were learning was relevant. Why was it relevant to each and
Uh-huh.
every one of us? And that is a real challenge that the teacher has to meet and 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 um, and prevail. I mean, students, if it's meaningful to them,
Sure.
then they're going to learn. If they're bored, I mean, there's nothing worse than sitting. Can you imagine what students have to do? They have to put themselves in their shoes to come into
Sure.
school every day and sit in one class after another. So you've got to come up with ways to really engage them that are meaningful. You have to maintain the high standard. And so back
Sure.
to the AI business, and our headmaster has told us, our head of school has made it clear that we can't ignore AI. It's a transformative technology. So, what is
Sure.
good in it, we need to be aware and develop that, embrace it. The negatives, we have to guard against those. And so, probably the biggest immediate problem is with kids using AI to write their papers. And there are ways to um, see that that doesn't happen, whether it's to
Sure.
just have
Well,
them. Yeah,
it's an interesting contradiction because on the one hand, you want students to really learn to think critically, and yet to just plug a topic into AI is to do almost zero thinking other than how do I make IA generate a paper on, Michelangelo, let's say. So it actually is completely diminishing what you're trying to do. So I assume you would rather have a kid muddle through a fairly maybe incoherent work of their own that's authentic, and that's something you can work with versus handing you some perfectly polished AI piece that there is no way this 15-year-old wrote.
well, what some teachers do is they have the kids generate AI papers, and then
Okay.
you go back and you examine them and point out the
Interesting.
inaccuracies or the shortcomings. Another
Uh-huh.
thing to say about AI is that it, as educators, we can't stick our heads in the sand and say AI is all bad and
No,
it's the
there's
boogeyman.
tremendous.
We have to
Right.
figure out how it can be used to enhance education. And,
Sure.
and one of the things that some people who listen to this might be thinking is, well, we've heard AI is going to replace, all kinds of occupations, even teaching, that every student could have
Yeah.
an AI tutor. Again, I
Right.
think this conversation has made it very clear that you need face-to-face interaction with human beings, um,
Definitely.
to
That's
develop
how
the
we're
social
wired.
skills and just the nuances of the way in which people relate to one another. It can't teach. I think the teaching profession is going to experience a renaissance in these
I agree with that.
next 20 years. I think it's a
I agree with that.
wonderful profession to go into. Now, teachers need to be paid better. But I'm
Sure.
telling you, I'm an example. I'm living a comfortable life now in retirement, um, and I can look at myself in the mirror and know that I've lived a meaningful, purposeful life, and
See, and
that's worth quite a bit. Yeah.
that's worth more than all the money in the world. That's for sure. Well, and I wanted to say, because I know you touched on this a little bit, but your head of school actually left a prominent downtown law firm to come back and be the head of school. And so I think that, sometimes people think, well, I'm a fill in the blank. And in his case, he was a really good lawyer. And yet there was something that drew him there. And I'm sure he's not making anywhere near the money, but I'm guessing that his days now are richer than they were in decades of doing what he did. So
You should
I
interview
think,
him. I mean, that's exactly what
oh,
he would
oh, that would
say.
be fun.
And
That would be fun.
he was a partner in one of the most prestigious law firms in Cincinnati.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the family, yeah, he decided this is what he wanted to do. He
I
gave
love
up the
it.
career in law, um, and he's a fabulous head of school. And so that's another
Wow.
thing that I would encourage you, those of you who are interested in education, take a look at the school district at which you might want a job.
Well, and
There's
there are
the
more and
issue.
more ways to get credentialed now than ever before without whether it's online learning or whether it's kind of, there's some ways they can give you credit for experience outside of the educational ecosystem. So, yeah, it's easier than ever to get involved.
Yeah, and the private schools, not the parochial, but the private schools, you do not need um, you do not need an advanced degree necessarily. You do not
Okay.
need a degree in education. I
Okay.
do not have a degree in education. I have degrees
Wow.
in history.
That's
So
amazing. Award-winning teacher impacting lives all over the world, but yet not an education degree. So that says something. I want to wrap up our time with a question that I ask all my guests, which is, what are you super pumped about as you either think back on your career or look forward to the future? What excites you, Merle?
uh, well, I'm interested in, again, I hear from students all the time, former students who want to get together for coffee. And so I'm interested in hearing what they have to say. Again, I guess I'm tooting my own horn here, but there are many, many kids. See, I give the students readings to do that I've
Uh-huh.
selected along with my introductions to them. And these kids, and the pile is thousands of pages
I've
that,
seen it.
that I,
Yes, it's
that I have
incredible.
photocopied. Many of them hold on to those 20 years
That's
later,
awesome.
30 years later. And so that suggests that I had an impact. But what 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 interests me, again, what was the question? What interests me
Well,
going
just
forward?
what are you super pumped about in your life? Looking at all this holistically, kind of either looking back or looking forward to what's in the future.
I hate to be a downer about this, but I think we have enormous challenges to face as as human beings and in terms of our civilization. And we need young people to get a great education. And that's the only way that we can turn these challenges in ways that are going to advance our civilization and our ability to care for one another, to have peace. and prosperity, to live in some degree of abundance. And the better educated, the better their high school teachers and their grade school teachers, the more likely it is that we're going to meet these challenges, for example, of climate change. Teachers have an enormous role to play in the future of the human race. We need to embrace that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Merle. Our tagline with the Super Pumped venture is engage, excite, and ignite. And I couldn't think of a person who has done that better in terms of your vocational work, of just meeting students where they were at, engaging with them on all levels of their life, inside and outside the classroom, getting them excited about what the world holds and what their role is in it, and then just seeing how you have ignited them to go out and do amazing things. So I just want to say thank you, Merle, and appreciate your time here today.
Okay, thank you. Teaching is a great profession.
Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped podcast. If you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app and tell your friends about the show so others can find and benefit from the Super Pumped community. And finally, to put the ideas from today's show into action, visit us at superpumped.com to view the show notes, book a complimentary consultation, or take our free business launch readiness assessment. Keep well, and I'll see you next time.